thank you for those kind words. So I said, my name is Rajbir Batra, and I spent many wonderful years here at Springdales School. So it's quite an honor to be invited back, and it's also quite exciting to see this Untitled Tinkering Innovation Lab. Congratulations to the school for this fantastic initiative. And so when Sir and Ma'am Ritu asked me to come and give a talk, I was very excited. I said, yes, just tell me, what do you want me to talk about? So they said, talk about your path from school to what you're doing now. And now that's a little bit difficult and also quite embarrassing, because I'm definitely not yet this grand old man who can reflect back on his old long career. I don't think I can pull off one of those preachy speeches, but I understand why they've asked me to do this. It's because some years ago, not many years ago, but some years ago, I was a student here in this very room. It wasn't the innovation lab, it was the biology lab there, right? Yeah. And I was sitting right there, I was in class 9, and I was doing that experiment, where you look down the microscope and you can see your cheek cells. So the idea of that experiment, I guess, is, as a 14-year-old kid, you're looking at your cells and it's magnified, and you see the cytoplasm, the cell membrane, and you're supposed to go, wow, look at the magnificence of human life. Except that really wasn't what I was thinking. My first emotion was pain, because I'd just been made to dig into my cheeks to get those cheek cells. And after that, I'm supposed to go on to onion cells, which means I have to peel an onion. That didn't help with the tears in my eyes. And after all of that, you have to go and write that whole thing in a lab report. Really, the last thing I was thinking was magnificence and wonderment. I was just thinking, when can I leave biology? And like I'm sure many of you who don't particularly like a subject, I did the same calculation. Okay, I'm in class 9, now there's one more year in class 10, I have to do it. And 11 and 12, freedom. So class 11 and 12, I took mathematics, computer sciences, I dropped biology. So no biology, yes. For my undergrad, again took mathematics, no biology, yes. For my masters, again, I took applied mathematics, no biology, yes. For my PhD, I got this grant, which meant I could do anything. I had the flexibility to do any research in the whole world. And I chose to do cancer biology and genetics. So that look that you just gave me, that's exactly how my uncles and aunts look at me. They're like, "Ye kaise hua? How did you connect mathematics to cancer medicine?" And so that's essentially what Sir wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to tell you the story of how I went from that boy who didn't want to do biology, vowed never to do it again, how he became a cancer scientist. So along the way, I'm also going to talk about choices like university, scholarships, and towards the end, I'll showcase some innovative projects that I was quite lucky to be working on in the fields of mathematics, artificial intelligence, but also genetics and cancer medicine. So I'll start with school. I don't have to tell you much about the school I was in. You guys know it much better than I do, but I'll start with a little bit of a tidbit. So a few months ago, a friend of mine, she messaged me saying, "Hey Rajbir, you were homeschooled, right?" And homeschooling, as you know, is where parents decide not to send their kids to a school, but they teach the kids themselves. So the parents become the teachers, and the syllabus is much more personalized. Now, I was really puzzled when I got that message. Homeschooled? I was like, no, I wasn't homeschooled. I went to Springdales School. And you should know that. We were in the same class. That's how we became friends. But then I realized, she wasn't talking about my time in Springdales. She was talking about my time before. So I started in Springdales when I was 7 years old. Before that, I was in Germany. Now, in India, when you're 7, you go to class 2. You've done 3 years of official school, right? In Germany, when you reach 7, you've done 0 years of official school. You go to what's known as a kindergarten. There's no academic teaching, no 1, 2, 3s, no ABCs, no tests, no homework. You just learn how to interact. You learn how to be a human being. You learn how to communicate with your friends. And this is amazing. It's a great system that works amazingly in Germany. The only problem is that at the age of 7, I had to come back to India. And so when I tried to get admission in the schools here, they all said, look, you haven't done these 3 years of school, so we can't take you in class 2, you have to go all the way to nursery. And I was 7 years old. That wasn't going to work. Now, luckily, my parents had the foresight, and in particular, my mom, she homeschooled me. She taught me a few things when I was in Germany. So my friend was right, I was homeschooled. Um, but still, the school still didn't want to take me in, except Springdales School. Mrs. Bose met my parents, she met me, and she said, yeah, okay, go on to class 2. The reason I'm telling you this...
She said, go into class 3.
Yeah, she said, okay. She said, go to class 3, but my parents decided maybe that's too advanced, so class 2. The reason I'm telling you this is because even before the first day I started in the school, I knew the school was different. I knew the school didn't just believe in passing official examinations. It valued a more holistic learning experience, as you guys know. And this sort of was maintained right through. So in school, as Sir said, my passion was mathematics. And again, I have to really thank the teachers that I had who identified this. And they really encouraged me to pursue this through national competitions and Olympiads. But this was just one element of my school life. So they really encouraged me at the same time, already not encouraged, they pushed me to pursue roles outside academia. So whether this was representing India in a cultural exchange program in Japan or setting up a fully functional recycling plant in this very school, these were the moments that I really look back and remember. And the values that you learn from these extracurricular activities they're really valuable. Whether you're applying for a job, going up in the career ladder, whether you're applying to university, or whether you're even starting your own business, these are values that are really key, whether it's leadership skills, helping the community, being able to share ideas with people from different backgrounds. These are really skills that are really important. So that anyway takes me to university. So you guys are in class 11. So I guess you're either figuring out or you've figured out what you would like to do next. Now don't worry if you haven't figured it out. I have friends and colleagues who knew what they wanted to do after school, they did it and are doing exceptionally well in their careers. I also have friends and colleagues who didn't know what they wanted to do, or they thought they knew what they wanted to do, and a few years later they switched and are now doing exceptionally well in their careers. You're not expected to know all the answers at 16 or 17. But the advice I will give you is try and find something that you're passionate about. Have you heard this phrase, if you love your job, you won't have to work a single day? It's rubbish. Of course you have to work. But if you love what you do, if you're passionate about it, it's so much easier to put 100% in what you do. And if you put 100% in something that you really love, you won't have to run after success. Success will run after you. But don't worry, if you haven't found your passion as yet, it will come to you one day. And my advice to you until then would be to try and build a diverse set of skills, a repertoire of tools that can be used across different fields. But also to keep your ears and your eyes open. Don't be afraid to try new opportunities. And when that perfect opportunity comes, you'll be in this prime position to jump straight into it. So in my case, as I said, I was very confident I wanted to do mathematics, right? And at that point, it wasn't the most trendiest choice for a student in India to make. In fact, I think I was probably the only student in the whole science stream that didn't give any of the engineering or medical entrance exams, because I knew I wanted to do mathematics. And luckily, my parents and my teachers, they backed me in that choice. So I applied to the UK and started an undergrad in mathematics and statistics at the University of Warwick. Now this is, again, for people who are interested in mathematics and want to pursue it, I definitely recommend this university. It has one of the best mathematics departments in the UK. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are thinking of studying abroad, either for your undergrad or maybe for your master's or at some point later? So that's actually many more than when I was a student. Now, the thing is, look, we all know Indian universities are world-class. They're fantastic. For almost any subject you want to do, you'll find a fantastic university in India. You don't have to look outside. But I would still recommend that for some stage of your training, do try and go abroad. And the reason I recommend this is because it diversifies your skill set. So it gives you a new perspective on education. So one of the things I found that's really ingrained in the UK education system is creative problem solving. So in the real world, problems don't always have straightforward solutions. And so you're really taught how to think outside the box, how to think critically, to think whether a solution, okay, of course, they have great advantages, but what are the limitations? How can you improve on that? You also learn a lot of life experience skills. So you're going abroad. This is maybe the first time you're living away from home. You learn how to be independent. You learn how to talk to people from different cultures. And best of all, you also get to build a great network of friends from all around the world. So I've got friends in New York, Brazil, Japan, Australia, Europe, Africa, everywhere. So that's also a great thing. So these are all the great things of studying abroad, but of course there's one big limitation. It's frightfully expensive. And definitely in my case, my parents couldn't completely afford to pay for that. So they really motivated me to apply for scholarships. In fact, I remember my father and I, we went through lists and lists and lists of scholarships until we found one that I was eligible for. It's really difficult. And I got that one. So try and look for scholarships. They won't be really easy to find always, but if you keep looking, you might find one. And the other thing is that usually to get into university, of course, that depends on academic marks. Examinations are very important, we know that. But if you're applying for scholarships, in general, they're also looking for two other things. They're looking to see if you've shown some sort of passion for the subject you intend to do. And they're also looking for a strong extracurricular record. So try and tick those boxes as well. So Warwick, I had a pretty good time, but I also worked very hard. And that enabled me to do a master's at the University of Oxford. And this was very special for me because not only was it a dream university, but I also got a full scholarship and a salary. So I didn't have to take a penny from my parents. So that made me feel very independent. It's a good feeling. So again, look for these scholarships. Now, Oxford is a very beautiful university. Just look at that. It's also the oldest English-speaking university in the world. And it's based on a collegiate system. So different colleges, just like Delhi University, you have different colleges. Oxford also has some old colleges, some new colleges. Now, I was quite lucky that I got into arguably the oldest college in Oxford. It's called Merton College. That's the building over there. And it celebrated its 750th year just a few years ago. And just to put that into perspective, we're talking centuries before Renaissance in Europe. We're talking centuries before Mughal Empire in India. That's how old it is. And that's why it is also connected with some really weird traditions. So one of them is the time ceremony. Now, before I talk about that, do you guys know what daylight savings time is? So daylight savings time is essentially, when you wake up in the winter and you look outside and it's really dark, but in the summer it's really light. So a lot of countries around the world, they use a system called daylight savings, where you can artificially change the time so that when you wake up in the winter, it's sunny. Look it up on Google, but in practice what happens is on one Sunday every year in October, the clock goes from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. just like it does every day. But then it goes again from 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. So that 1 hour is repeated twice. Now usually you don't really notice it. You're fast asleep, and the great thing is you get 1 extra hour of sleep. So usually you're asleep, except if you're in my college. If you're in my college, all the students have to congregate in the field of the college. It's a square field. They have to wear their best white bow tie, their suits, and their gowns. So it's very Harry Potter-esque. You have to link your arms. So that's me in the middle. You have to link your arms, and you have to run around the field for 1 hour. Backwards. And the idea is that we believe that by doing this every year, we're saving the universe. We're stabilizing the space-time continuum, and we're making sure the universe doesn't explode. So that's one of the weird traditions. Another one is dining hall. So our college has a dining hall. This is a picture of another college, Christ Church College. The reason I show you this picture is because Harry Potter fans may find this familiar. So the dining hall at Hogwarts is based exactly on this dining hall. So the idea is, again, if you want dinner in college, you wear your finest suits, you wear your gown, and every evening at 7:30 you sit here and you get a 3 or 4 course meal, and it's ridiculously cheap. It's absolutely fantastic. So of course I had all these weird traditions, very interesting traditions, I had a great time. But Oxford is also where I learned a lot. So this is the first time where I used concepts such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. So are these terms familiar to you guys? What do you think of when you think of artificial intelligence? Anything springs to mind? Robots, I heard robots. Yeah, that's perfectly right, yeah. So artificial intelligence is this broad concept where machines, such as robots, do things that we consider intelligent. And at Oxford, I used a specific application of artificial intelligence called machine learning. Now, machine learning is where you can actually teach a machine to learn over time so that ultimately it can make decisions or predictions that are useful for us. Now, that might sound like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but essentially very similar to human learning. We are born as a baby, we don't know anything, we go to school, we train, we practice, and we become good at things. That's human learning. So let's take an example. Let's say I'm rubbish at cricket. It's true. So if we get the best bowler from Springdales School to go in the field and bowl a few balls, how many do you think I'd be able to hit? I'll tell you, 0. Won't be able to hit anything. But let's say we keep on practicing. Every day they bowl 100 balls, I try and bat. We do this for 1 month. What will happen? After 1 month, I won't become way much better, but I'll become a little bit better. And let's break that down. How do I become a little better? Well, we can break it down. So I essentially got a lot of data, which in this case was all the cricket balls that were being thrown at me. Over the course of 1 month, I was able to analyze that. So hopefully, very quickly, I figure out whether they're a fast bowler or a spin bowler. I hope that happens quick enough. I can figure out what sort of speeds they're bowling, where the ball is bouncing, where it's turning, and so on. And over time, I can then make a prediction, so that when the ball comes and it bounces, I can make a prediction as to where the ball might go, and then make a decision as to what cricket shot I should hit. So essentially, our brain has done this, is looked at the data, analyzed it, and made a prediction. We don't even know our brain is doing this, but that's what our brain is doing. So machine learning works in a very similar process. So for example, it's used in YouTube. So I watch a lot of YouTube videos. So you know when you watch YouTube videos, you have this sidebar on the right which gives you recommended videos, right? Now, more often than not, those recommended videos are really relevant and they're really interesting, and I always click on it, and then I click on it, and then there's another one, and I click on that, and then there's another one, and I click on that, and then 5 hours later, I'm still clicking. But how does YouTube know which videos to recommend? How does it know which videos you like? It's based on machine learning. So it looks at a lot of data, which is your YouTube history. It looks at your YouTube history. It also looks at everyone else's YouTube history. So look at my history and says, aha, Rajbir, you like videos of animals doing funny things. And the last video you saw was this one of a cat sneezing. So it'll then look at everyone else in the world who also like cat videos, and it'll say, okay, from these people who also like cat videos, a lot of them like this video of a cat dancing. And so YouTube then makes a prediction based on that analysis that Rajbir, you also will like that video of a cat dancing, and sure enough, I did. So this is basically how machine learning works in YouTube. It works, you use it in Facebook, and Siri, and Amazon, and Google search. It's used all over. And at Oxford, I used machine learning in medicine. I used it to predict the risk of a person getting a disease. So this also worked on very similar principles. So I not only worked at the university, I also worked at the hospital. And so I was able to work with patients. And so for patients who gave us permission, we were able to use their medical records, right? So our data in this case was patient records. This could be doctor's checkups, this could be blood tests, this could be images such as x-rays, all of these records. We collected these records for thousands of patients, and we tracked these patients over a long period of time. I mean, some of these studies have been going on for 10 or 20 years. We tracked them for a long period of time to see which patients do they get what diseases. You know, do they get heart disease, do they get bone disease, do they get liver disease, and so on. And once we collect all this data, we can then analyze this. So we use statistical modeling. These are basically mathematical algorithms that can extract relevant information from all this data. And this is usually run on computers, and hence that's where the machine learning comes in. And once we analyze this, we can then make predictions. Now what's the prediction? If a new patient comes into the hospital and gives us access to their medical records, we can then make a very accurate prediction of when and whether and when they're going to get a heart attack, for instance. Now these machine learning algorithms are really complex. They're based on advanced mathematics, and that's really where my background came in. But I can tell you they're based on very simple principles. So let's say we have patient A who's 70 years old, smokes every day, doesn't exercise, eats unhealthy. And we have patient B who's 30 years old, swims every day, eats very healthy. Who do you think has a higher risk of getting a heart attack? The 70-year-old smoker or the 30-year-old swimmer? All of you got that. Why? Because human learning. Because as a kid, you've always been told, okay, if you're old, you might get ill. If you better eat well because it's healthy, you better exercise, don't smoke, the things we've been told. And because of human learning, now in this situation, it was very easy to predict who is going to get a heart attack. With machine learning, you can deal with more complex scenarios. You can find even more factors associated with a heart attack, for instance. And you can make a very accurate prediction of when a person might get a heart attack. Now, why is this important? Well, because instead of waiting, let's say 10 years for that person to get a heart attack and then trying to cure it, it's better off to say, look man, if you don't start eating these medicines or change your lifestyle, you will get a heart attack. So let's prevent it, right? So that's where you could use machine learning in medicine. Essentially, this was what I was doing in Oxford. And soon after that, I got into a PhD at Cambridge. Now, a PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy. But it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with being a medical doctor. It also doesn't necessarily have anything to do with philosophy. But what it does entail is 3 or 4 years of work where you're making an original contribution to knowledge. So this could be, for instance, trying to fill a gap in the knowledge. So for those of you who are interested in history, we all know about the Indus Valley civilization. This is one of the oldest, one of the largest civilizations, not too far away from where we are right now. Unfortunately, we don't know too much about it though. And that's because even though we found scriptures from the civilization, there's a lot of text, we can't understand the language. So one of a potential PhD project might be to try and understand the language of those texts so that we can really understand and get more information about the civilization. So that's one sort of PhD where you're filling in a gap in knowledge. PhDs can also be about trying to identify solutions to problems in the world. Right? So for instance, this could be for finding a cure for malaria or finding a cure for cancer, and this is what I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Now, usually PhDs are very much like a job. You'll have a professor, they might have a vacancy in a project, and you apply for it, and if they like you, you start working on the project, and you usually get paid by the professor or by the university. In my case, I was lucky where I got what's known as a grant. Now, I won't go into details of what a grant entails, but essentially what that gave me was a lot of flexibility to really choose what research I wanted to do. So essentially I got 1 full year at Cambridge where I didn't have to straight away start working on a project. I could actually start talking to professors. I could work with different teams on small, maybe 2-month internships. I could use that time to try and find out, what are the problems that I'm interested in? What are the problems I would like to solve? And who are the people that I would like to work with to solve those problems? So for the first year, I spent at the Department of Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics at Cambridge. It's a spaceship-looking building. And now I'm going to do a name drop. So we're very subtle. Let's see if you guys can spot it. So this was my office over here. The director of research of the department when I was there, his office was here. And he was none other than the late and the great Professor Stephen Hawking. And he, as you know, has made immense contributions to the fields of really trying to understand the mysteries of the universe. Now, being in the midst of such an eminent scientist, you're speechless for a while. And what you do is, and the first thing I did was tell all my friends about it. But after that, you get really inspired because, I realized I was there for a year where I really had this chance where I could really try and identify new things to do, identify new problems. And that led me to the field of genetics and cancer medicine. This is a field I had no experience in, absolutely none. But by talking to professors, by doing an internship, I realized this is a field which I wanted to dedicate the 3 years of my PhD project to. So for the next 3 years, I spent at the Cancer Research Department at Cambridge. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I did there. But for that, let's talk about cancer. Now, cancer is a word that is associated with a lot of emotion, right? It instills a lot of fear. Because most of us know somebody who's either suffered from the disease or is suffering from the disease, and it's a devastating disease that unfortunately sometimes you don't survive. But what actually happens when you get cancer? For that, we need to talk about DNA and genes, right? I'm sure these are words you're familiar with. If anybody wants to volunteer, what do you think of when you think of genes or DNA? Among biology students? Yeah, okay, and what is genetic material? I don't need a definition, but what comes to your head when you think of genetic material?
Inherited traits.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Genetic characters from our past. Hereditary characters that carry on.
Yeah, you're spot on. So it's something that we get from our parents. It's what makes us similar in some sense to a biological mother and father. But also it contains instructions for our body to follow. So we've got trillions and trillions of cells in our body. We've got brain cells that perform the function of a brain. We've got heart cells that perform the function of a heart. And each of these cells have this DNA, right? And this DNA is essentially an encyclopedia for your body. It contains instructions for your body to follow. Now similar, have you seen those old encyclopedias which come in different volumes? You have volume A, volume B. So similarly, our DNA, which is an encyclopedia, comes in chromosomes. And these chromosomes also have chapters. So you might have some chapters which contain instructions for your heart. So those are your heart genes. You might have some chapters which contain instructions for your brain. So those are your brain genes. So essentially your DNA is this whole encyclopedia, and the chapters are your genes, right? And now, as we live, we've got new cells that are being formed every minute. In fact, in the last minute, we've made millions and millions of cells. And as these cells keep dividing, as a new cell keeps forming, basically what happens is that the old cell passes on this DNA, this whole encyclopedia. It has to photocopy this whole encyclopedia of instructions and give it to the new cell. This is very important because without that encyclopedia, the cell won't know what to do. So it has to pass on this encyclopedia. Now, if I ask you guys, let's say I open an encyclopedia to one page and ask you guys, I want you to copy that page exactly word to word. What might happen? Look, you would probably get, all of us, we probably get most of it right, but we might make some spelling mistakes. We might miss out a word here and there. Our body copies this whole encyclopedia millions of times per second without, or very rarely, making any mistakes. It's fantastic. But in cancer, these mistakes creep up. So you could get some spelling mistakes, or you could get some deleted words. And essentially, think about it. If you've got a set of instructions, and you've got a spelling mistake, or you've got some words jumbled about, those instructions won't make sense anymore. And that's why you get cancer. But what actually causes these mistakes to happen in the first place? Well, as I said, a lot of it is just mistakes creeping up in cell division. And as you grow older, these mistakes accumulate, and they build up, and that causes cancer. A question I also get asked is, what about lifestyle factors? What about eating and smoking? Now, of course, if you eat unhealthily, if you smoke a lot, if you're stressed a lot, your body is under a lot of stress. And so you're inviting more mistakes in your genes, and so you're more likely to get cancer. But these lifestyle factors aren't just the only factor. So unfortunately, even if someone lives the most healthiest life, they still might get cancer. And I also get asked, is cancer hereditary? You get it from your parents. You do, but it's not very common. So you guys know of the Hollywood actress Angelina Jolie? So she, essentially her mother had a mistake in a gene, and her mother got breast cancer. And the doctors found out that Angelina Jolie also had that mistake. She inherited that mistake in the gene from her mother, and so she also would have a very high risk of getting breast cancer. So what they said is, let's just do surgery, and so now you won't get breast cancer anymore. So in her case, she inherited from her mother. But 90% of people, or more than 90% of people who get cancer, it's something you accumulate over your lifetime. It's not something that you're born with. Okay, so that was basically 101 for cancer. But how can we use all this information to try and find a cure? Well, it's a very complex problem. I'm going to try and explain one strategy and break it up into 2 bits. So as I said, in cancer, usually you have some mistake in your genes. You've got a mistake in your DNA. So the first step is to try and find that mistake, right? So how many of you guys can find the mistake in this slide? If you find the mistake, just raise your hand. Just raise your hand. I'm going to give you a few. I'm going to give you a few more seconds. So we've got. Yeah. Okay, excellent. So what's the mistake? Exactly. And you see that still took a few seconds, right? This is just a six-word sentence, but it still took a few seconds to find that mistake. Our DNA has 3 billion letters. 3 billion. So imagine trying to find a mistake in your DNA. So of course there you need, again, advanced mathematical models to try and do that. But once you find the mistake, that's not just sufficient. You have to understand what the consequences of that mistake is. Now, a mistake in one gene could cause one type of breast cancer. A mistake in another gene could cause another type of breast cancer. A spelling mistake could cause one consequence. A deleted word could cause another consequence. So you really need to integrate your cancer biology and your genetics knowledge when you find these mistakes. So step 1 is to find these mistakes and understand the consequences of these mistakes. And then step 2 is to try and find the drug that can actually treat this genetic mistake. Now, this is not very easy because, as I said, you're finding so many mistakes. You have mistakes in one gene, you have to find a drug for that. You find a mistake in another gene, you have to find another drug for that. So it's not just one drug. So how do we use this research to help us treat patients? So at the moment, or in the recent past, if we had a lot of patients, let's say with breast cancer, we only had one therapy for all of them. And that therapy may work in some people, it would not work in some people, and for another set, it would work for a few years, but then it would stop working. And this is not satisfactory. So we can use all of that research to do genetic testing. So now if you have a large bunch of patients with breast cancer, the hope in the future is we would get to what's called personalized medicine, where for every patient, you can then do genetic testing. You then find, okay, for these group of patients, they have a mistake in gene A. For these group of patients, it's a mistake in gene B. For these patients, it's a mistake in gene C. So, of course, you can't give the same treatment because they're completely different root causes. So we give different treatments for each of these groups, and then hopefully it works. So that's what we're looking at the future for cancer research. And that's essentially the research that we're doing. So this is the lab that I was working at Cambridge. We focused on breast cancer and genetics. And what was apparent very, very quickly was that in order to solve these problems, you can't do it on your own. One person can't solve these problems. You need a big team that's multidisciplinary. So we had medical doctors, biologists, mathematicians, computer scientists, physicists, all working together to solve this problem. In fact, that person over there is my wife. She's done an undergrad and a master's in biology. So she was a research assistant in the lab, and she also helped me in the project that I was leading. So we need lots of people with different backgrounds coming together. The other thing I realized was that in order to be really good at your job, in order to be a good scientist, let's say, you of course have to have expertise in your subject. And my subject, as you know, was mathematics. But you also have to build expertise in the other subjects, whether it's medicine or biology and so on. And so I took a master's course while I was there. I took a master's course in genetics, and I also spoke to all these fantastic people, learned all these skills, and exactly 4 years after I took that master's course, I got the opportunity to lecture in the same genetics course for master students at Cambridge. So if you try new things, you can always surprise yourself. Now that really takes me to the end of the talk today. So I finished my stint at Cambridge this summer. I graduated with a PhD in genetics and breast cancer. And just 1 month after I graduated, my grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer. Now let me tell you something, no matter how much you study about the disease, no matter how many PhDs you do or how many talks you give, when a loved one gets cancer, you feel the same emotions I was talking about. It's no different. And so this was a very difficult time for her, of course, and a difficult time for the family. Because as I mentioned, with cancer, you don't know whether treatment's going to work. Is it going to make her better? Is it going to make her worse? We still have these question marks. So the recommendation that I gave her, as well as the doctors here gave her, is do this genetic testing. And breast cancer has 10 different subtypes. We found that she has that one subtype of breast cancer, which is very aggressive. But it's also that one subtype of breast cancer for which we not only know the gene which is disrupted, we know the consequence of that gene being disrupted, and we also have a drug that can control it. That doesn't make things very easy breezy because these therapies, we're talking about multiple years of harsh chemicals, radiation, surgery. And hats off to my grandmom. At the moment, she's going through all of this with great positivity, great energy. She's organizing exhibitions, she's teaching people, she's having social events at home. So there's a lot to learn from the older generation. But back to the point that I was making is that because of medical research that lots and lots of people have been doing for all these years, my grandmother can see light at the end of the tunnel. For the other subtypes of breast cancer, it's still a question mark. But for her, there's this hope that's there. She can see light at the end of the tunnel. That tunnel might be really long, the tunnel might be really difficult. We're still not 100% sure everything's going to work, but she can see the light. And so the hope is that if you guys continue such innovative projects, then in the future for any person who has any type of cancer, or for any person that has any disease, or for any person that is suffering from any hardship in the world, they can also see light at the end of the tunnel. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening. These are references for the images, and again, I'm happy to take any questions. We can do questions right now. If you want to email me, that's my email address. Just shoot me an email. So yeah, thanks so much for listening, and thank you for calling me.
Yeah, any questions?